Children of Bodom, one of my favorite metal bands to listen to. Their music is really aggressive and lyrically vulgar, but at the same time, this band incorporates melodic riffs and virtuosic solos in their songs, which is why many fans and critics label them melodic death metal. But Children of Bodom have been labeled a number of genres, sometimes thrash metal, other times power metal, and one point in their early years, symphonic black metal. Today, I want to take a look at their older material, because this year marks the 20th anniversary of Children of Bodom's first album, Something Wild. So the question I want to ask for this video is, what makes this album so important? And why do I like it so much? Before diving into the band's first album, let's talk about the term melodic death metal. It combines the vocal aggression, the fast speed, and harsh sounds of death metal with the melodic elements such as guitar harmonies, keyboards, and sometimes melodic singing. In the early 90s, this genre was starting to take off, thanks to the early works of Carcass and the bands from the Gothenburg metal scene. In Finland, Children of Bodom, then called Inearth, comprises of 5 members. From the start it was Aleksi Laiho, Jaska Raktikainen, then came Alexander Kupala, Henkka Seppälä, and Jani Weerman, or Warman. They changed the name from Inearth due to what the members of the band say, a rip-off deal. So Spinefarm, their label at the time, told the band to break up, quote-unquote, and start a new band, thus became Children of Bodom. The name was picked after the band were looking up a phone book of all things and found a place that stuck with them, Lake Bodom. That location would end up being one of the song titles for the first album. They also took the name after an unsolved mystery. June 5th, 1960. 4 teenagers were camping by the shore of Lake Bodom, but one evening, between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., tragedy struck. They were attacked by an unknown assailant. 3 of the campers were murdered, but the 4th survived. To this day, the murder has not been solved. There were a few leads. One of them involved the surviving member of the murder, but all of them were inconclusive. Each of the band members brought something to the table. Aleksi's love of Steve Vai on guitar, and his influence as a vocalist, Phil Anselmo, and many black/death metal vocalists that he was listening to. Jaska's progressive percussion. In parts of the album, he'll just be drumming along to a song, and then all of a sudden, he would go mad on the drums. Henkka's thunderous bass work, which you can certainly hear throughout the album. Alexander's rhythmic roar on guitar. Each note that's being played and palm muted by Alex is just gut punching. And Jane's classical input on keyboards. There are parts in the album where Jane would take the keyboards to a lead approach right next with the guitar. And other times, the keyboards would be in the background, as if Jane was conducting a haunting orchestra. From the album Something Wild, there are 7 songs, and the length time is around 33 minutes, making this the shortest album the band has ever recorded. But it features more of their longer songs, In the Shadows and The Nail, their shortest song, however, being the first song on the album, Deadnight Warrior. The lyrics are primarily about death, violence, and horror. It's worth mentioning that the lyrics on most of these songs were improvised by Aleksi. However, the last song, Touched Like Angel of Death, is the only song that featured lyrics. Speaking of horror, if you listen to the album, you'll hear bits of movie snippets in the beginning of some songs. Deadnight Warrior has a sample from the movie It. The Nail has a sample of Nightmare on Elm Street, where you hear a door creaking open before transitioning to a speech from the movie Ben-Hur.
Your eyes are full of hate. 41. That's good. Hate keeps a man alive. It gives him strength.
This has been a recurring motif throughout their career. I talked about Janne's input to the band was very classical. You can definitely hear in this album, for example, like in songs of Red Light in My Eyes Part 1 and 2, and The Nail. And the neoclassical metal guitar playing of Alexei and Alexander as well. If I have to choose which song is my favorite, I can't decide. Although I will say from Lake Bodom to the end is when Children of Bodom actually start to sound like an actual band, but that's just me. When it comes to forming a metal band, a good chunk of them have a mascot, ranging from big names like Eddie, Vic Rattlehead, and Snaggletooth, or underrated ones like Murray, Alistair Vale, Jack-O-Lantern, or Chally. One-offs like Jesterhead and Not Man.
Wow, you are just the grand central station of disappointment, aren't you?
And laughable names like Henry, Roy, Deathbat, and wait, go back. COB's mascot is named Roy. Roy the Reaper. I got nothing to say to that. Anyway, how this became the album cover for Something Wild is that the band was looking at a place selling art books. They had to buy the rights to it, which I would imagine it didn't cost that much if it's just a Reaper in a wasteland, but afterwards, Roy would become a part of COB family, appearing in future albums in different variations. The band were in their late teens when they recorded that album, which is pretty rad if you think about it. There was only one music video that they did, and that was Deadnight Warrior. If you watch the video, yes, they are playing outside after a snowstorm, so you can imagine what that must have been like for those guys, especially Jaska. When the album was released, the band dismissed it, describing it as technical, even to this day as a matter of fact.
There was a lot of there was a couple of technological mistakes made, bad mistakes made during the recording of the first album. So I feel it's a bit of well, even for our age and even for the time, it was a bit amateur hour. There's a couple of pretty crucial mistakes, but it is what it is. You have to start somewhere, and that's where we started.
Despite the criticism the band makes, this album has put COB on the map. Over the years, as their song list grew and grew, so they're the less desire to add any other song from Something Wild on their live set, with the exception to Deadnight Warrior and Lake Bodom. Up until their 20th anniversary tour, the only song that they haven't played live was In the Shadows. The reason? According to Yanni, it was never meant to be played live. Very complex. To which, I agree. You know, I've been listening to melodic death metal for almost a decade. There are songs that I understand the lyrics to from certain bands, some not so much. Just to name a few. I guess it requires multiple listens. Anyway, why do I love this album so much? Why? Because of the way it sounds? Because of how melodic some of the songs are? Because of how crazy the guitar riffs are? The answer? All of the above. That's it, everyone. So, to close this video out, let's let Alexei remind you who they are.
So we're Children of Bodom, we come from fucking Finland. And the next guy's name we call Lake